that feeling, yeah, again, again. You give me that feeling, yeah, again, 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 again. I want you just to shout it out. And give it up, we give it out.
Sharing your stories and playing your songs on Graham's JFDI Show.
Good evening. It's Thursday, the 11th of April, and I'm apologising already for being 3 minutes late. If I just apologise and say it's my fault for being late, because I was doing what I do best in the green room, just gabbing. So it's 3 minutes past 8 on Thursday, the 11th of April, and I've got somebody that I would love to introduce to you. Another of my fellow, we'll save that. Okay, this evening's guest comes to us with a background and a degree in business management and marketing, I believe. She's been giving nutrition seminars for years. She's also a fitness instructor, and I believe, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I am pretty certain that you were Scotland's first Wim Hof female Wim Hof instructor, and certainly Scotland's first level 2 female Wim Hof instructor. Just tell me if I'm wrong. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big hi G's and JFDI show welcome to Lorraine McDonnell. Hello.
Hi, Graham. Thank you for such a fabulous warm welcome. I normally don't get that kind of introduction.
Am I right? Are you where you were, right? First level 2 female Scottish instructor.
Yes, a real honor and a privilege, humbly, really grateful to be able to say, yes, I just so happen to have been the first of many, many more to come.
Isn't it cool though?
I suppose it feels good, but everything about the Wim Hof method and practicing it and infiltrating it into my lifestyle and encouraging others to try it out is, it comes from a good place. It's very, centered in good intentions. And so, yes, it's a real honor and a privilege. Absolutely, Graham. And thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. You're very welcome. As I was saying in the green room just before we come on, I've had a break, and it's when I come back I realise how much I love doing this, and how much I love speaking to people and finding out more about them. And I always say, off air or on air, I ask people onto this show. And hopefully can do their story a little bit of justice and just ask the right questions, because I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated in learning more about people, and that's why I asked you to come on. So thank you for agreeing to come on, because just agreeing to come on, there are a lot of people. So I should give a shout out, shouldn't I, to the people that I've asked, who out of the goodness of my heart, and because they all asked me to, the people that have said no, I am not coming on to your show. So the fact that you're here, and there's so many that have said no, it's an absolute honor to have you. I can't wait to get cracking and talk through your songs. Can I ask you one question?
Yes, of course.
Actually, it's okay. I know the answer to it. I can see that you're bringing the energy, and the only reason that I would even bring that into question is that when I was listening to all of your songs, I was like full of energy because I'd had my cold shower and I was like all ready to go. And then I put the music on and I was like, "So we got your first song," and I was like, I was into the swing of it. And then the second, the third, the fourth, and the fifth, I was like, "Oh."
Oh, really?
No, I like them. They're all. I like every single one of those. Well, there's maybe the second one we'll get to, but
Okay.
on the
Okay.
whole, they're all good songs. But they're quite low tempo. They're quite downbeat. They're kind of quite slow. And I
Yep.
kind of love. I think the all varieties of songs. When you said, "Oh, I hope my song choice," your song choice is wonderful.
Mhm.
And that's what I love about this as well, is everybody chooses completely different songs.
Uh-huh.
Because my choice doesn't matter. It's about your choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Isn't
well,
it such a difficult task to choose just a few songs of all the songs that are out there?
yeah.
Um,
But you
yeah.
you did it you did it a way that I've not I don't think anybody has said they've done it this way before. So there's a lot of people will curse me. There's a lot of people will they'll message me and say, you this, you that. How am I supposed to pin it down to 4 or 5 songs? There's so
Yeah.
many. I've got a whole lifetime. And I'm like, well, that's the point, isn't it? Just
Uh-huh.
think a little bit, think a little bit about it. But then there's other people, and I love it. I think depending on how much music has genuinely like played an influence, and I believe it influences everybody's life, which is why we have the
Yes.
team. But sometimes some people just find it so easy. They'll just go
Mhm.
boom, 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 boom. That's it, done.
Mhm.
Send me them.
Mhm.
But you are the first person who told me that your children helped you, or your children chose the songs for you.
Yes. So, I'm thrilled and honored to be a single parent to three children. It's such a cliche to say like they are my everything, but the four of us together are out there living our best lives, building experiences in all aspects and wonders of life. And so we tend to consult each other about things, and actually often something that resonates with them sparks a memory in me, and I think, oh yeah, light bulb moment, yes, that's a good song, for example. um and yeah, because they're such an integral part of my life, we
Yeah,
share a lot of memories together, and will continue to do so. So
lovely.
certain things that resonate with me will resonate with them and vice versa. Not always. Obviously, we're our own individuals, but
Yeah.
we had a lot of fun in the car recently coming up with song suggestions.
Oh, brilliant. So should we do the first one?
Like, go for it.
Let's go for it. Yeah, because now that the way in which you've articulated how you went about that, now extremely looking forward to getting cracking. So let's start with Elvis,
Oh
Presley,
no.
the King, and Suspicious Minds. So who got to choose this one and why?
So actually, I chose this one, and I cringe a little bit actually at the thought of choosing this song, but in a really good way. So, "Suspicious Minds" is a song for me that's very nostalgic. My dad has always loved Elvis. And growing up, I remember him singing and dancing in the kitchen. And I have these beautiful memories that are ingrained in me forever of him making me dance with him to this particular song amongst all the other Elvis songs,
Yeah,
and a few Irish ones to boot as well. And what's wonderful about that specific song right now in this moment in time is my daughter, who is 12, almost 13 years old, is currently listening to and loving that exact same song. So all these years later, at a later stage in life for me, it's had this revival. And so I think to myself, wow, your granddad will love the fact that you're enjoying this song. So it's
yeah,
kind of like it's transcended three generations now. And I just love the fact that something old is also timeless. And
yeah.
yeah, so that's why it was a song choice.
I love that. Have you had a moment? Are you able to have a moment with all three of you listening together?
Not yet, but I definitely think that that's got to be on the bucket list of things to do, because why not, you know?
And the question would be, who would be getting who up to dance first?
It could be any one of us, to be honest. Um, Probably my daughter, and we'll all have our own very individual dancing style as well. So God knows how it would look from somebody else viewing the
Oh,
scene, you know.
yeah, I love it. Fantastic. Well, there you go. A bucket list to do. So yeah, here's a question for you. Talk about your children. If you take yourself back, what's your earliest childhood memory? And I guess, then how did childhood kind of influence your early decisions growing up, if you will?
Wow, that is a question I was not aware you would ask. So my earliest childhood memory is actually with my dad.
Yeah,
Um, in fact, my earliest childhood memories, there are a few, but when I think of the very initial ones that I can remember, they're all with my dad on the farm. I remember seeing a rainbow and convincing him that we needed to stay and go back to this field because I was finding the crock of gold before we went home.
yeah.
And then convincing him that I didn't want to go home in the car. I wanted to be outside, obviously swallowing flies in the trailer. And back in a time in Ireland, health and safety wasn't such a big deal and it was all doable. So that's a very profound early memory and a
Yeah.
really lovely, happy one, you know.
Mm,
And being in his arms and holding his hand, going to mass on a Sunday morning, which I did back then.
yeah.
Um, you know, and they're precious. They're very precious memories.
And whereabouts was childhood then? Whereabouts were you living?
So I grew up in this fabulous, idyllic, rural Irish village called Tallow. It's in County Waterford in the south. For those who aren't familiar with County Waterford, it's not that far from Cork. And as I grow up, and I've lived abroad now for more than half my life, but still go back to Ireland really regularly. I always feel like a huge part of my heart is still at home, and the sense of community in this town growing up and still today is just
Mm.
like nothing I've ever experienced anywhere else. But of course, I'm biased, you know.
We're allowed to be, and we're very biased and patriotic as Celts, aren't we? Are we not?
Yes, yes, and that's a good thing.
I think so. Yeah. Yes. Um, so I'm wondering whether or not we move on to your next song now,
Let's
or
move on.
I'm kind of wondering because I'm wondering the memories of the songs, but I am keen to. We'll get to it. I'm sure we'll get to when you actually moved to Scotland. But let's do Ed Sheeran
Yes.
because
Okay.
it's this was the one. This is so Galway Girl by Ed Sheeran.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, yes. Is there a story attached to this?
It's a fairly simple, straightforward story. My eldest child is a boy. His name is Lachlan. We call him Lockie, and he will be 14 in a few weeks' time.
Yeah.
And he went through a phase when he was younger, around 8, 9 years old, of being, you know, a huge fan of Ed Sheeran's. And it's not that he's not still today, it's just that his music taste has evolved and developed a lot. But he particularly gravitated to the Galway Girl song because Galway is in Ireland and his mother is Irish. And so we used to sing together. Not that we're great singers, I'll be honest, but we were belting it out and like dancing in the kitchen and in the car when it came on the radio. And, you know, anytime it was audible, we made a big deal about it, or we would replay it over and over and over, you know.
Yeah.
And I would think to myself, this is fabulous because in no time at all, this little kid, my eldest boy, will be into other types of girls as opposed to his mother, you know? Right now, I'm the equivalent of his Galway girl, and it won't be like that forever, you know?
Just enjoy it.
Yeah, enjoy the moment and the
Yeah.
innocence of it all, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah. That's where
what
that
are
one
your
suited.
thoughts on that as a bit of a way of life, trying to enjoy the moment as much as possible?
So I believe in my heart and soul that I am a very happy person in general these days. Life hasn't always been easy or happy, and I would say that's the same for most people if they were being truly honest. And I
Yeah,
tend to show up and be honest to the best of my ability with anybody.
yeah,
You know, and be proud of where I've come from and where I am, and not with a sense of ego, but more so humility, to be honest with you. And what I know for sure, what I've built an acute awareness to, is the fact that when I'm living in the moment and appreciating that moment is when I'm most happy. So that for me can be doing breath work. So you're connecting the breath and the mind and the body. It can be outside in nature and just appreciating the view and your surroundings. Moments with my children are usually top of the list, but also just gratitude, humility, a sense of me not being the most important thing or the be all and end all, that like being able to zoom out of oneself and see the bigger picture of things helps me right size whatever's going on in life. And a big part of that is being in the moment. And you know, I love that I get that, because I get to have an opportunity to go out there and live my best life. And sure, why wouldn't you? You know?
I love the way that you put that. Simple and very effective, and yeah, I love it. Yeah. So you mentioned a few things there during that about like where you've been and where you're at. Um, when where have you been?
Where have I been? Oh, goodness. Graham, that is a loaded question. So, I mean, you mentioned 2018, 2019. I would say around about that time, 2018, in fact, uh, in the 2 years in the lead up to that year, I felt like, to all intents and purposes, the wheels were coming off in life for me for whatever reason. Um, I'm someone who's always liked to be in control, organized, have things together, you know, busy. Historically, that's the kind of person I was, a bit of a workaholic, probably, amongst other things. And a point in time came in life where I definitely was not happy. Um, Lifestyle changes were required. But before I got to that point, before I hit a kind of rock bottom in life, I would honestly say,
Yeah.
um, like the wheels literally came off. I lost all sight of myself. I couldn't make clear decisions. I was full of anxiety and fear, and I just felt like all of a sudden I was mask wearing and wasn't being true to myself. I didn't know what direction to go, so confused, overly stressed, stretched too thinly, feeling as though I needed to conform what I thought other people
Huh.
expected of me or did. So I definitely, that younger version of myself, cared too much about what other people thought,
Okay.
and felt like I needed to pigeonhole myself, you know, into a particular stereotype.
Okay.
And it cost me a lot in terms of health and happiness at that point in time. Um, but, you know, I didn't stay there. I made a few decisions. They weren't easy at the time. And from that point, things went on the up, you know.
Okay.
I became very proactive and invested in educating myself and living a therapeutic type of lifestyle, really.
Yeah. Was there a moment that kind of an incident or just like a epiphany, or was there one moment back then that kind of did that sort of like changed the trajectory?
There was definitely a defining moment for me, and at that point in time, I was full of fear and doubt, but also negative thinking, self-sabotage. I didn't have a great sense of self-confidence at that point in time, Um, and the thing that instigated the first right move, the first step in the right direction, that leap into the abyss as it was, because I was about to really overhaul my life, the children's lives, and change everything. But it was how much I love the children, actually, that encouraged me to move in that direction, as scary as it was to make the changes.
Yeah.
uh, and you know what, it's like 6 years later. um, we're all in a great place. I have happy, healthy children, thankfully. Um, they probably think I'm a little bit too adventurous at times, but they'll see me out there giving things a go or trying something new. And, um, I have much more work-life balance these days,
Yeah.
quality time, so the teething problems and the initial changes, as difficult as it was to start with, it's all been worth it. I have no regrets, basically, in
Yeah.
that regard.
Sounds like a journey. So at which point along the line? So before I'm kind of trying to jump the gun and ask you about like how you found out about Wim Hof, but before we get to that, what were you doing when life was really bad? Was this as a nutritionalist at this time, or are you doing something else at that time?
Yes. So at that point in time, and one of the things I felt I needed to change was I needed to work less. Um, so I had two small businesses, running kind of like side by side. One was a fitness business and the other was a nutrition business.
Yeah.
I had been very ambitious over the years, Graham, and I was basically trying to develop a nutrition business that was purely online. Now, this was before apps came along, and before people were really doing fitness and nutrition type things on an online platform. It wasn't really developed at that point yet, but I had this huge vision, and I invested quite a bit in a business startup, and it was a catastrophic failure for
Oh
many
no.
reasons. And but that failure in itself at that point in time, I'm so grateful for, because I learned so much and I realized that I didn't want to live to work, and that work wasn't
Mm.
the only thing that defined me. Um, and so it was a catalyst for some other changes, along with some other personal lifestyle changes as well, I've got to say.
Yeah.
But yes, certainly the work thing, I've always loved working in well-being, but I chose to keep adding more and more and more. And
Mm.
that's counterintuitive. It doesn't really go with what I'm endorsing. If I'm delivering a nutrition seminar and talking about work-life balance, yet I'm not doing it myself, then I don't feel
Yeah.
like I'm a good advocate.
Got you.
Um, you know,
Yeah. So what you mentioned, some other life choices there. What other life choices did you kind of, you know?
well, other life choices. I
It
decided.
fascinates me because I've done the same. I've done the same.
So I decided, quite honestly, that while I love partying and I'm very sociable and kind of like you, Graham, I have the gift of the gab, being Irish and everything. Um, that alcohol no longer served me,
Mm.
and that it wasn't something that fulfilled or improved my life anymore. In fact, it was taking from me. So it became this negative thing as part of my lifestyle. So I made a choice back then to stop drinking, and I've stayed stopped, and I'm very confident and comfortable with that choice. And I'm invested in continuing to stay abstinent from alcohol. So that was one of the other major areas.
Yeah.
And the other one was, and I'm going to try and word this very delicately, but in the lead up to that year, I had been married and now I'm not. And so that was quite a big personal choice and a
Yeah.
change of family lifestyle, and obviously something that initially hugely impacted my children, who I, love more than anything. So it was a brave decision. It was also a very big transitional time. I'm very grateful to see that all parties of what was that nuclear family unit are now individually and together very happy, which is great. So there can be success in making these choices. It takes time and effort. I think both parents in this situation do our very best to show up and co-parent to the best of our abilities, and that's
Yeah.
another thing I'm very grateful for.
Yeah. Wow.
So in a nutshell, Graham,
I would say, anything else?
that's kind of it. Isn't that enough?
That's pretty. Yeah, I mean that's some pretty big life changes. That is.
Yes, yeah, quite a
Yeah,
few for sure.
yeah. So, so out of this, what? Because there might be something else. What would you say? What's the hardest thing that you've had to do in your life? You maybe mentioned it already.
Actually, I haven't. The hardest thing I've had to do in my life is get over my own sense of fear. I was crippled with anxiety. I had PTSD and complex PTSD because of past experiences. I had insomnia, agoraphobia, anxiety, panic attacks, depression. I mean, you could throw the kitchen sink at it. And through various choices I've made and natural tools I now have at my disposal every single day, if
Yeah,
anything triggers me to feel any way anxious, I can stabilize myself through the power of the breath very, very quickly. And that in itself is, nothing short of a miracle.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, let's move on
Okay.
and tell me how you came about finding Wim Hof and the Wim Hof method and what made you want to become an instructor.
Okay, so thanks so much for asking that question. I find the answer kind of semi-funny because it's very typical of me in that I came across it by accident. So basically, one day a friend of mine turned around to me in the swing park and said, Lorraine, you should get all over this Wim Hof thing. She's like, this is right up your street. And then I kind of, it planted a seed. I forgot about the conversation. And then literally weeks later, we're in a lockdown situation. And I became a little bit intrigued about the fact that people were sea swimming and saying they liked it. So that to me was just so foreign. I'm somebody who's walked around the house in winter in Scotland or Ireland my whole life with a hot water bottle for my hands and one for my feet if I'm staying stationary. Like I have an aversion to the cold. Why would you torture yourself? Was my instant thought. Uh, Yet one day I decided to hop in the sea. I probably managed like 5 or 6 seconds. And then it was like something out of the crying game. I was prancing around the place. I have Raynaud's, so my hands and feet were agony. And but I drove home and I felt like, you know what? Despite not liking the cold, I feel amazing. I feel like I've achieved something by just having done that. And it's not for anyone else. It's not for anyone to need to know. I like this feeling, which I now understand to be, dopamine release and endorphin release, and the anti-inflammatory impact, all those wonderful benefits we get from cold exposure, even if it's just a few seconds. And then I went to Google Wim Hof when I got home. So this was a Sunday morning. And there he came up, and there was lots of lovely reading material. And I thought to myself, and I do like doing things on impulse sometimes, Graham.
Yeah,
So I decided, you know what? I'll sign up to do the fundamentals workshop or fundamentals course.
yeah,
And then I started tapping my fingers. And 5 minutes later, without really doing any further reading, I didn't even know his background inspirational story at that point. I just thought, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it properly. I'll sign up to be an instructor as well. So, and then, so I signed up to both, and then I hung back and had major imposter syndrome,
Oh yeah.
self-sabotage, and thought, what am I doing? I'm going to be trying to compete with all these people who do X, Y, and Z. And then I changed my mind again very quickly, and I thought, no, something's telling you to just go with this and see where it takes you. And off I went. I started training. I completely embraced it. And next thing you know, so many months later, I'm in Poland with wonderful people like you, Graham, and the sense of community and camaraderie around being together in that environment. It's life changing. It's so profound. And do you know what? You don't start that journey and then come to a halt. It's so good. You keep on going with it, because why wouldn't you? You know?
Yeah. I've got a question that I always ask, which is, this is called the JFDI show. How do you JFDI? And you've answered that question on the back of another question, in just going for it, and as you said, and just, you know, just freaking doing it.
Yep.
It's so. What would you say, since then to now? What's the best thing about being a Wim Hof instructor for you?
Well, first of all, I think it's really important to say I love it. I love it so much. I love the community that's been built up with regards to those who are instructors, um, and the positivity that we have an opportunity as instructors to pass on to other people who so choose to engage in it, because they're intrigued, or perhaps they've already done some form of breath work or been seeing swimming but want to delve in a little bit more to discover what else it can do for them. Hand on heart, it's my absolute favorite thing to do in all aspects of work these days. I put my heart and soul into it because I love it so much, and the energy vibration. I mean,
Yeah,
regardless of how the participants feel. I mean, God love them. They've no idea what they're in for when they sign up to one of my workshops. But I am all over it. Like, you know, I feel so compelled to pass this magic on to other people. And it's coming from a good place. It's from a place of all that is good, which you'll know only too well, Graham.
yeah,
And even if people go through the motions of the experience and just include one element or part of each week
mm,
within their own lifestyles, well, that in itself, that's going to have aggregately quite a big impact on their mental health, their overall general health, you know, immune system, a sense of happiness. You know, who wouldn't want to push the boat out for a bit more happiness? Like, there's nothing bad in that.
yeah. So here's a question. I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to ask a question on behalf of one of my guests tonight. I've not done this before, but Vicky used to be an old boss of mine, a very good friend of mine and Karen's. She's a lovely lady, and as kind of last year when we all met up in Linlithgow, she went in the ice bath. She's got her own now. She won't mind me saying her practice. She let she did it once and then didn't do it for about a year. And I when we met up in Newquay, I didn't need to drag her. The day that we arrived, we went in the sea, and the next morning, so she didn't come in, but the next morning she was sitting, we were at the breakfast table together, and she said, I should really go in the sea today. And I just looked at her and I didn't say anything to her. I just smiled, and she said,
Yeah.
I'll be 5 minutes. I'm getting my bag. And she came down and she absolutely loved it. And I think since we got back, she's been in her pod her light pop up in the back garden. I think she's been in it, maybe not every day, but considerably, like regularly. So my question is on behalf of Vicky. What would you say, Lorraine, to anybody who's at that point in terms of just kind of beginning, just increasing the practice, and getting that sort of, you know, dopamine hit and adrenaline kind of, and sort of recognizing those benefits?
Mhm.
What would you say to somebody in that position in terms of the best thing to do to gain a little bit of consistency, to learn a little bit more about other benefits? You know, what would you say?
Oh, I love the question. Thank you to Vicky, and well done to her for continuing on with her journey. Like, more power to her on that front. Um, there's two things that come to the top of my mind. The first one is in relation to my own personal, like, mission statement, which is to make everything you do as fun as possible, realistic to achieve around your current lifestyle. So I've learned over the years that trying to be perfect at things is really actually ultimately only holding me back, because I'm setting a benchmark that's unrealistic. And so, for example, I decided at one point that doing breath work 3 times a week was realistic in the morning. And if I did breath work any more than 3 times, then wonderful, that's an extra bonus. But that at the very least, no matter how busy things were, that I would do breath work 3 mornings a week. And you know, so setting a realistic goal, I think, is really helpful. And then when you go above and beyond that, which we tend to do when we're really enjoying something, then you feel actually extra good about yourself. Let's not say smug, but let's say quietly satisfied. And the other thing that I would recommend for anybody is to have a little search online and see if there's a local group um, close by that meet regularly and get together to do a sea dip or any kind of cold body of water type dipping. And these days, you know, it becomes such a big social thing, because then you're part of a community, and there's so much more in that than just the benefits of cold exposure. It's the social element, it's the
Mm.
showing up for each other. Yeah, it just becomes like a wonderful part of all that you do. And for often for a lot of us, one of the most important things we do, because it's just so good.
Yeah. Yeah, she said, Vicky said, that you sound fun. Maybe she should go on one of your courses.
Do come along for sure.
So there is some chat of them coming back up to Edinburgh. So we
Fantastic.
could make that happen.
We
Um,
could. Everything's possible, isn't it?
absolutely, yes. Okay, I think we should move on to your next song, because I think we should go on to your next song,
Okay, let's do it.
because it's back to Ireland
Yeah.
for Bono and the boys, you two,
Oh
and
yeah.
beautiful day.
Uh-huh. Beautiful day. So you two, we all know they've been around for a long time. I grew up listening to you two, and Beautiful Day in particular. The video that coincides with that song and the recording was done on, part of it at least, was done on the rooftop of the BBC studio in
Yeah,
London. And I happened to be in London at the time. Um, and yeah, and so to be in the vicinity of that being in the making kind of made it extra special. Like, you link the memories of your visit to London on that occasion with the song.
yeah,
So that would be one of my bigger reasons for choosing that particular one. I've always loved you two. There were many times over the years I tried to get tickets to you two concerts, and they were sold out too quickly. And then finally, when I lived in Australia at one point, I managed to get 8 tickets to a concert in Sydney, and it was cancelled at the last minute.
Oh no.
And then fast forward years later, in the end, I finally got to see U2 perform in Glasgow. And yeah, I mean, of all the bands I've ever loved, they're probably one of my all-time favorites. So that's why.
Oh. So what so did I take it they played that song in Glasgow then?
Yes, 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 they did. They did. And you know, it's positive, it's uplifting, it's the song has their vibe all over it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. How long have they been going? Was it late 70s?
Hmm. I
It
think they
was, wasn't it?
started before I was born, actually. Um, so they've been
Crikey.
around for a while. Uh-huh.
They have. They've been around for a long, long time.
Yeah.
So when they played Glasgow, in fact, tell us what Glasgow, Edinburgh. We didn't. I'm not sure you mentioned when you moved. What was it that brought you from Ireland to Scotland?
So,
And
um,
when was that?
I moved to Scotland in 2006, so 18 years ago. And just before living in Scotland or moving to Scotland, I lived in Australia for a few years.
Yes, you said.
Um, and I met a Scotsman in Australia who then later on in life became my husband.
Ah,
And we
okay.
had 3 children together. So, and for all those things, I will never have any regrets.
Yeah.
And yes, so I met him in Australia. He convinced me to move to Scotland. And I said to him at the time, I'll give it 6 months. Like, Scotland's not the warmest country, and I like the sun. And here I am, you know, and I love Scotland. I think Scotland is one of the most beautiful countries in the world, and I love exploring it. And it's just the quality of life here is fantastic. It has rained a little bit too much lately, but you know, we'll take it. It's all good.
And to be fair, Ireland's not that much warmer than
No,
Scotland.
no, it's not. It's not really. So, like, you would
It's
think
not
I'd be
like
conditioned
you're moving. It's not like comparing
from the
Scotland to like
Mediterranean.
Jamaica, is it? It's kind of
Exactly, exactly. So what have I got to complain about, you know? And as
yeah.
you said earlier, we're all Celtic, which is wonderful.
Yes,
You know,
we are.
we share
We are
similar
indeed.
traditions.
So, what
Um,
would you say? What would you say? I've got a great question here, but I'm going to change it slightly.
okay.
Oh, excuse me. I've got a hairball and I don't have a drink. Excuse me. Very unprofessional. So what I was going to ask was, what do you consider your best and worst qualities? But I'm not going to ask you that, right?
Ooh.
I'm not going to ask you that. What I'm going to ask you are,
Mhm.
since you've been in Scotland, what would you say? What would you say the best and worst qualities that you have, or maybe not qualities, qualities slash habits that you have picked up since moving to Scotland?
Oh, okay, right.
Does that make
Um,
sense?
yes, yes,
So
it does.
it could just be a guilty pleasure, I guess. One, I mean,
Right, right. You see, I've got like some.
or maybe Scottish swear words that you didn't know. I don't know.
Right. Well, do you know what? Listen, I'll let you in on something without using those words in this forum. But I knew every word under the sun before I moved to Scotland, so I can't blame Scotland for that, you know? As much as I'd love to pass the baton to something or somebody else. Um, Scottish people have a real zest for life and a great sense of humor, and I feel that that's something that's quite similar in Ireland.
Hmm.
One of the things I found the most difficult to start with is understanding strong Scottish accents.
Oh
Uh,
yes.
and this whole fascination I had with deep fried Mars bars and assuming, you know, that's what everybody ate, and haggis and all that kind of jazz, and iron brew. um, and in terms of habits, a good habit I've developed since living in Scotland is um, this ambition to explore. You know, sometimes, and I think actually COVID magnified that even more in a very positive way. Sometimes we forget to fully explore the space we live in and the area we're in and the country we reside in. We can be very quick to want to explore far reaches of the world, yet we forget about what's fantastic on our doorstep. So I would say that's a huge positive. Um,
That is a great sort of, I guess, even if it's just an awareness of
yeah.
since being here,
Uh-huh.
and I could not agree with it more. It's that my wife and I, who I don't know if you noticed that, it's the first time that I'm extremely grateful. You know, I said there that my throat
Yes.
was, and I hadn't brought a drink up with me. My wife is obviously watching. Uh, the high G's set is actually my loft. Okay,
Right.
and
Yeah.
my wife never comes up here for so many reasons. she stays she stays she stays well clear of
You know,
here.
I get that.
But she obviously heard me say that I had a little tickle, and she
Uh-huh.
brought me up a glass of water. How sweet was
Wow.
that?
Yeah, that is,
But
you know what? You owe her.
I do,
She's
I
gonna
do.
love me for saying this. But yeah,
Lorraine, I owe her for so much more than a glass of water, trust me.
that is like unconditional love right there. You know, she's pulling out all the stops.
Yes, but we said exactly the same as you said. A number of years ago, we said,
Mhm.
you know, we're always trying to get a nice holiday abroad. But what we've done for about the last 10 years is that we've tried to go away in October to somewhere
Mhm.
that we've not adventured to in Scotland.
Yeah.
And it's always that time of year where it's starting to get, it can be miserable. So it's like one
Yes.
of those where we always just take our wellies, take like a scarf, a hat, and you know, and a big jacket, and we just
Mhm.
go and we have some fun
Yeah.
in Scotland. Um,
Fabulous.
and it's yeah, and even myself, I've noticed that I think I've used my location as an excuse, but
Hmm.
I have a whiskey barrel in the back garden where I go in the cold, and I don't go, you know, I'll go in the sea occasionally over at Portobello, but
Yeah.
but I know that there's a Avon Lagoon um, that's very close to me where a lot of people go, and I've still not made the time to go, and I'm absolutely ashamed. I should
No
be doing it.
shame.
It should be I should be JFDI in it myself. So anyway, I love that. I love that, and I think that's a great quality to have had. Um, so here's a question:
Okay.
exceeding qualities, right? This is you talked about earlier about being quite ambitious, and when you were talking about the web startup. So flash forward to now
Hmm.
versus then.
Hmm.
There's certain things that you know that change, and certain things about us that are underlying. So what you know that will always remain.
Yes.
What would you say now? Would you consider what sort of legacy would you like to leave for yourself and your children? Because I know how important they are to you.
Mm.
I
So
bet you weren't expecting that, were you?
no, no, and so I have irons in a few different fires at the moment. One of the things I've taught myself to do in the last few years is dream really big, like really, really big.
Yeah,
Um, and teach myself how to manifest those dreams. And so some of my dreams and aspirations, they're so big they semi frighten me.
yeah,
And that's when I know that they're big enough.
Are we talking like Grant Cardone style?
And to somebody else, it will mean nothing. It will be nothing. But
Yeah.
I create a vision board in my bedroom and all these images of things I want to achieve every year on the 1st of January. And I've been doing it for 5 years now. And my children see it.
Brilliant.
And so one of the things, for example, last year was I wanted to climb Mont Blanc, and I managed to do that. One of the images this year, which I don't think I will achieve this year, but I'm planting a seed that's delving deep into my subconscious mind, where that sense of self-belief will become so strong, because these images are the first thing I see in the morning, the last thing I see at night. And that is that I wanted to write a book, and the book would be about empowerment. And infiltrated into the book is how I've taught myself to manifest these dreams, like how we can all do it, but how practicing something like the Wim Hof method has taught me to expand the limits, the perceived limits that are in my mind. So it's like quietening the negative noise, improving the quality of my thoughts. Because I know, like, I'm all happy and vivacious now, Graham, but I was not like that a few years ago. I was very negative and definitely not being the best version of myself. Not that I'm perfect. And so the legacy I would like to leave is that life is not a dress rehearsal. We have one shot at this. Make the most of it. Center everything with kindness, coming from a place of all that is good. And it doesn't matter if you fail, just give it your best shot. Just try, show up and see what happens.
If I could describe how I feel about JFDI and what I kind of it all stands for, you just said it. How would you
Oh,
like
that's
to? How would
amazing.
you like to? How would you like to? I love what you said. So, where are you at with the book? What's happening
So,
there?
so actually, I got stuck. And what I mean by that is I haven't actually, you're going to laugh when I say this, but I'm going to be honest, right? I haven't written a word since before Christmas.
Well, let me tell you, you're a real writer then.
Well, I just felt
Because
like if I don't have anything profound or like worthwhile or meaningful to say, just don't say it. So I've been stagnant with it. But I've written between 60 and 70,000 words of what we would refer to as a very under par first draft. I wanted to swear there, Graham, but I refrained, and I'm very proud of myself for doing that. For a very, basic, could be much better first draft. So that's where I'm at. It's not formulated into chapters yet. But because I'm looking at these images every day that are telling me you're going to be a published author someday, I met with a fabulous friend who is a published author yesterday, and who coaches novice writers, so that I could basically get some tips from her. And I wanted to have the conversation so that I'm making it real again, and then go and do some homework and push myself out of my comfort zone. So, do you know what? Watch this space. I just feel like I have a book in me. I certainly have enough material to
yeah,
put in there. And even if nobody ever reads it, that cathartic process of writing, it's so healing. I'm finding, you asked about being in the moment. My mind can't be anywhere else when I'm going through that process, and it makes me happy. You could call it a hobby. If it helps one other person, then I'll have fulfilled my purpose with that writing.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, who knows?
Oh, I know. Fine. Tell me of those tell me when she started the vision boards. How many of the things that were on the very first vision board have been manifested?
So thank you for asking that question. This is, got to honest, no word of a lie. I usually have between 20 and 25 images every year. And so far every single one of them have become a reality. And things I put on there where I would think to myself, you're actually having a laugh with yourself, Lorraine, but put it up. It's a dream. Put it up there. This is what manifestation is about. Um, and it somehow miraculously materializes. And what happens is, I don't necessarily know how these opportunities or things are going to show up until something happens or something crosses my path. And because the image has been there, I intuitively know then to not halt or stagnate or think about it, just go for it. Go
Yeah.
for the plunge, say yes, do the thing, put the action in, whatever the case might be.
JFD.
Um, so it's great. It's wonderful. I would encourage anybody to do it.
Do you know, I've often I journal and have done for a number of years. A number of other things that I've changed and do very differently. Vision boards, I thought about it after I listened, watched over and over and over again to The Secret, because they talk about it in there quite a lot, don't they?
Yes.
One chap in particular. So maybe I do have a spare cork board downstairs, so that's a start, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And it doesn't need to be artistic or fancy.
Yeah,
I actually tend to go onto Google Images, and when I find the image that resonates with me enough,
yeah,
I'll have an idea in mind, but I wait until I find the image where I think that's exactly what I'm trying to visualize. I just didn't see it yet. And then
yeah.
I print it off. And for me, it's as basic as a bit of glue tack and stick it on the wall. That's it. You know.
Right. Okay. Well, a lot of have a lot of what category would most of the things that have been stuck on there come into? Would it fall into the category of like experiences that you mentioned earlier on?
So one of the categories is adventures with my children.
Yeah,
Another one is career goals. Another one, which is the center of the whole vision board, is centered around spirituality. Uh, because spirituality for me and that connection with spirituality, that's where happiness is at for me.
Mm.
So sometimes they're very, very specific types of images. Like I said at the very start, for me, everything that is manifested needs to come from a well-intentioned place, because I'm throwing it out to the universe. The universe will pass those gifts on to me. Whereas if, for example, if I was choosing an image that was, me wanting to become a millionaire, I don't think that that dream is going to just manifest itself. So they're not that type of thing. But
Yeah.
if I'm doing good for others and being of purpose and it's kindness centered, then it's going to work. And then kind of like fitness, personal adventure goals, and let me think what else. They're kind of the main ones, I would say. Always one that involves the children and I having experiences.
Yeah.
Um, for example, one year I hoped to have a world champion nutrition client.
Ah, okay.
And I just thought, I don't really know any kind of like available world champions on my doorstep. Like, how is that going to happen? And next thing, this wonderful young talented girl and her mum crossed my path when I was instructing a fitness class, and they were looking for a nutritionist, and I had the opportunity to work with them for quite some time, and that was just a really wonderful process. I learned much more from them, I would say, than the other way around.
Right. But it happened nonetheless. Has she gone on to
It,
be a world champion?
yes, she was
Yes.
under 18 British champion in wakeboarding. Yes, she did. Phenomenal.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, here's a quick question. You can answer whatever you like. Tell us something you've never told anyone before.
Right. I'm going to tell you a little secret.
It's all right. No one else is listening. I'm
Well,
totally lying. I'm totally
maybe a
lying. There
couple of
are.
people, maybe a
Yeah, yeah,
couple of
yeah. There
people
are. There are.
know.
There are.
But
It's okay.
it's
They won't. They
it's a
won't tell
little
anyone.
secret. I'm not embarrassed about. It's like being a bad habit, a bit bad in inverted commas, but no shame, right? I'm very much an advocate for. We're not going to wear any shame labels. We're not doing that to ourselves, you know. But despite the fact that I'm a nutritionist, I am a full on, like, major compulsive chocolate addict, I would say. Now, that's like pretty strong phraseology, but like, Graham, so much so that I have to stash it in the house. I can eat it en masse. I can eat chocolate right up until I go to sleep. And then what I used to do to myself would be like, have the walk of shame the following morning of like, oh my God, all the empty chocolate wrappers, like how many did I have? And I have tried to get on top of that habit so much over the years. And just
Mm.
recently, actually, because I do like to, you know, be proactive about things. And so I went for a hypnosis session
Oh,
and it worked.
did it?
I can't quite believe it. So I was binge eating chocolate every night since God knows how long. And there's one thing I recall because I did go into a deep, deep trance. The hypnotist, who was phenomenal, said to me, your chocolate addiction is on a train. And now the train is stopped, he said. And he said, what we're going to do is we're going to take a wire out of the engine. And now the engine just can't start. It doesn't matter how much you try, but that train cannot restart. And what's been wonderful about it is I walked out, you know, I'm very open to these things. I walked out thinking I still have, because I was firing chocolate into my gob on the way to this appointment. Like, I was like, I'm not having lunch today. If I'm going to be hypnotized to quit chocolate, I'm going to eat it right up until I walk in the door. And I told him so much as well. We were roaring laughing, and I was like, and I'm a nutritionist, you know, and this is what I do. And and yes, it was like somebody took the mind battle away from me. Isn't it amazing? And so I had a month of not just being, and this wasn't intentional, and I didn't have to try. I just didn't want it anymore. So I had a month of being completely refined sugar free. And so then I got in touch with the same hypnotist and I went back for a second appointment and I said, look, it's like this. I said, I'm delighted. Thank you very much that I don't eat chocolate anymore. But I was like, can you fix it for me? That I have a little bit of chocolate every now and then, but just not in excessive amounts because, you know, it's one of life's best pleasures. I would like to just be able to eat a little bit.
Yeah.
And so for the last couple of weeks, I've had a slice of cake here and there. I mean, Easter Sunday came and went, Graham, and I did not eat Easter eggs until I was sick. I just had a bit of chocolate that day. And so it seems as though now I can take it or leave it, which is all I ever wanted to be able to do. I just couldn't do it on my own somehow.
Yeah.
So there you go.
I love that. I love that. And the way in which that they did it, the chocolate train.
Yeah, the chocolate train. Yeah, I mean, isn't it wonderful? Someone can speak to your subconscious mind.
I
And
know.
so I've decided I'm going to go back to this hypnotist to do other specific things
Oh,
in relation to reinforcing what I'm already manifesting dream wise, to help with
ah,
self-belief and
okay.
um, yeah, the willingness to just push forward, that type of thing.
Ah,
Um,
you mean
so
you're going to go and be hypnotized to chase away some of that imposter syndrome?
Well, do you know what? The imposter syndrome features much less these days, I've got to say. I've learned how to
Good.
quieten that noise, you
Mm,
know?
yeah. Oh, yeah. I know exactly. How do you what do you use to quieten that noise most?
I think the first time I became aware that it was even a thing or something I did was on level 1 training with the wonderful Emma Estrella in Poland. And I had almost passed out in the cold on the snow on one of the days of the outdoor cold exposure activities.
Mm.
And I just about pulled it together in the last moment. And we did a debrief um, back at base camp. And she said, I'd never heard the phrase before or really brought any awareness to it. And she said, you have imposter syndrome. You have major imposter syndrome. And now she's a woman in the Wim Hof world who I really respect. Uh, she's a very strong female leader, I would say. And so I was listening to her intently. And I went home and I reflected on it. And I thought, she's so right. I am my biggest enemy sometimes. The only person who gets in my way usually is myself. I'm my own barrier. And so I started to look at that and I realized it's a whole load of energy going on rent free in my head. And why do I think I'm so important anyway that there needs to be all this thinking round about the such and such that I would have imposter syndrome about? And so a bit like, I used to be the person who gave myself a hard time about body image. Now, as I get older and move further on in life, Graham, let's just say I'm not as fit as I used to be. And, physique wise, I'm not trying to strive for perfection or doing any of that. I'm so relaxed. I am the person who just alluded to the fact that I have eaten chocolate for God knows how many years. Um, but my level of care with regards to how I look is so much more diminished in a positive way. So, like,
Mm.
worrying about how I look in swimwear, getting into the sea, which is something that would have stopped me from doing it at all in the first place years ago.
Yeah.
It doesn't even factor in because I'm like, that's not the end result. It's got nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
Don't listen to that noise. So I've just consciously taught myself to dull down the noise. The thoughts will still come and go.
Yeah.
It's about right sizing it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I do. I
And
really,
like,
really do.
who cares? Do we need to have the perfect physique? Like,
No. Thank you very much indeed. We've still got 2 songs,
wow. Oh my goodness.
but what I will say, we've got 2 songs, but I've only got a few questions left. So,
Okay.
uh, we will. Shall we move on to Lady Gaga
Go
and
for it.
Shallow?
Yeah. Uh, Lady Gaga. I love Lady Gaga. She's such a unique artist. I love her style. She doesn't feel the need to kind of conform in what she feels other people might expect of her. She's this wonderful artist. She, as a vocalist, as everything she's about, I just think she's incredible. I've always loved her music. And then there was something about the movie, her role in the movie, and understanding when I watched the documentary movie with her being interviewed about the making of the movie,
Okay.
that she felt like in concert she wears this persona, of the costume and the everything else, whereas her role in the film, she wears no makeup. She's got, a simple hairstyle. It's not about the image. She's just been natural. She's been her. She's been her authentic self in that character,
Mm.
and she is just a shining star when she sings. And the power of her voice, and oh my God, I wish I had a talent like that. So since the song came out, I won't lie, I sing that song a lot in the house on my own and only wish that my range could go all those octaves. So there's certain verses, it's like so high pitched, I'm like, I'm just going to stop now. um, And yeah, I think it's a very powerful song. I love the fact that she's written it and she sings it so beautifully. It's just,
Yeah,
yeah.
lovely. Right, I think that we'll move on to your last song,
Okay.
um, because it's Sinead O'Connor and Nothing Compares to You.
Yep.
So I should just tell our listeners, viewers, that you gave me 3 songs at the beginning of the week. You then gave me another song. You kind of drip fed them to me, and then you pulled out this big Prince written made famous by Sinead O'Connor, this big bomb of a song on me. Doom, Nothing Compares to You as the last song.
Mhm.
And a reminder, because all of the rest of them is they're all good songs in their own right,
Mhm.
but there's always something about this song, like, from the
Mhm.
moment that I first heard her sing it as well.
Mhm.
There's something
Yeah.
about that song, the way in which she sings it, um,
Mhm.
and then I guess like what her life went on to be after that as well. So
Mhm.
when I saw you choose that song, I thought, yeah, that's
Mhm.
yeah. So Sinead O'Connor, Nothing Compares to You.
Yeah. Sinead O'Connor, I mean, there was a chat show in Ireland called The Late Late Show, which is still running actually,
Mm,
with a host called Guy Byrne, which was on every Friday night from as long as I can remember, all the way through my early childhood years, teenage years. And there were certain guest stars on that show, and there's a memory of the interview, and Sinead O'Connor would probably be top of the list. Um, I loved the fact that at a time in Ireland when Ireland was still very traditional, conservative in a lot of ways, old fashioned, the majority of people, between 80 and 90% of people in Ireland at the time, were practicing Catholics. My family being Catholic, um, I'm no longer a practicing Catholic. I'm not opposed to anyone who is. I tend to focus more on spirituality, and I think it's an individual approach and, personal choice.
yeah.
Um, but Sinead O'Connor spoke in that interview about burning a photo of the Pope. So in staunch Catholic Ireland at the time, and she came on stage with a shaved head. Like this was all, she was such a rebel. And she dared to say and do things that everyone else would have been scared to do.
Mm,
And it was like, wow, this girl is ballsy and she can sing. And that like wild streak in me, when I was younger like that, I loved her sense of really not caring, and not worrying about what anyone else would think. And she liked the controversy of it all. She like embraced it. And it gave her a lot of acknowledgement because she was doing something very different. She was running against the grain of what most other people in Ireland at that time would even dare to do.
mm. Yeah, she had some guts, to say the least, didn't she?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And out came this song, and she performed that song that particular night. Again, a really unique, wonderful vocalist. And yeah, just phenomenal. Loved
Yeah.
her. My parents were sitting back in the seat going, oh my gosh, who's this one? They were shocked.
Oh, Lorraine, it's 9:15. We've been
I know.
talking for an hour and a quarter.
Yeah,
I've had such a blast.
so high.
Your story is fascinating. Much of what you said, and my guests. Let me just. I don't know if you can see the comments, but our very own Stuart McDade said tonight, "Love listening to you, Lorraine. Very inspiring." And then a good friend of mine, Malcolm, he said she sounds very awesome, Very wise words about life not being a dress rehearsal. Would love to have this ethos every day. I
Oh.
concur, Malcolm. Vicky has said JFDI. And my good lady wife, Karen, has said, such a lovely, interesting chat. So
Oh.
I just want to say thanks. I've got a couple of questions just
Oh
to
God, I
close this
thought
off.
we were done. I thought we were done.
No, we are, but these are more closing questions. Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Graham.
Just listening to like the last two songs as well, but the story of Sinead there, having listened to your journey, do you have any regrets? Is there, if you could go back, is there anything you'd do differently?
Despite the fact that I am very open and honest in saying I have had low points in life and genuinely hit a rock bottom where I was stripped back to the very bones of vulnerability and almost had to relearn how to live life.
Mm.
Despite that, I would say absolutely no. Because for me, I make mistakes. I will continue to make mistakes. I am not perfect, nor am I striving to be perfect. I
Mm.
used to feel a sense of guilt and shame and remorse and, like the self sabotage we were talking about.
Yeah,
Uh, and instead of letting life's happenings and traumatic experiences um, knock me down to stay down, I've decided to use them to try to become wise, to educate myself and let it be in the past, but let me try to research as a better version of myself and to pass what I've learned on to other people. That's one of my biggest purposes in life, is to share my experience, good and bad, and be humble about it and not try to pretend that it was perfect either. I do believe fundamentally that is a part of what we are here to do as human beings in this earth.
yeah.
Um, and I still make mistakes all the time, and that's okay.
Well, didn't Oscar Wilde say every saint has a past, every sinner has a future?
Yeah,
And
for sure.
I love what you said. Yeah, we all have pasts. We can't do anything about it. However, the one thing that we can do is we can acknowledge to ourselves, we can forgive ourselves for any of the things that we did back then that we're not proud of.
Hmm.
We learn from them, we move on, and like you said earlier on, we just do the best to live for now with the.
Hmm.
And I love the bit that you mentioned earlier on about living for now, but living and doing things with good intention. I think
Yes.
that for me is like one of the things that people listening tonight, that is, because it's easier said than done, that bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
you
for
know
sure. Yeah. And I would still say, Graham, I'm still the little child on the inside who's terrified of life. But
yeah,
doing things like practicing the Wim Hof method, um, practicing being in the moment, all these other things that you and I do as part of our lifestyle, it means that the fear can still be there, but the courage, that sense of courage that we can tap into, outweighs any sense of fear. And so, courage to me, the definition of courage is taking action and moving forward, not in the absence of fear, but moving forward in spite of the fear. So the courage takes over, and it's like, that book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. It's like a
yeah,
leap into the abyss, and that's what we do when we do the Wim Hof method. Like, I
yeah.
used to think people who did ice baths were deluded. And now I'm like diving into them.
Oh, we've had a few book references in tonight. So, and you mentioned about writing one. So This is down in the bottom right-hand corner of my little script for tonight, to ask you, without knowing that you were writing a book.
Okay.
This is maybe not the book that you're talking about. This is maybe another one. What would the book of your life be called?
Oh, Know Thy Name or something similar. Something.
What
There is
about
a
a blurb?
book with that title already. But yes, something like that. Like no, and what I mean by that is learn who your true self is, your authentic self.
Yes. Yes. And that was and own that person. Own it.
All in all,
Yes.
yeah.
No, don't half-ass it. Be 100, 200
Unapologetically, go
completely.
out there and be crazy.
I love it. Lorraine, thank you so much indeed. Please
Thank you.
stay in the green room. Don't go anywhere just yet.
Okay.
But thank you so much for
Thank
coming on. It's
you.
been amazing to chat to you.
Oh, thanks so
And
much,
thank you
Jim.
to our guests this evening as well, to those that were tuning in. Next week, we'll be back with another fellow Wim Hof instructor. We're going a little bit further afield for next week. So just watch social media and find out who it is. And we will speak to you later. So from Lorraine and myself on tonight's JFDI podcast, good night from me.
Bye. Bye.
See you next week.